Life is a funny thing. You start off not knowing a thing, and before you know it, you've lived 100 stories worth sharing. Let me tell you about mine. When I was just a boy, I worked at a little shop in town, sweeping floors and stocking shelves. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work. That's when I first saw her, your grandma. She walked in wearing this blue dress that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. Her laugh, oh, her laugh was like music. I froze right where I stood, broom in hand, like a fool. I was so nervous to talk to her. Back then, courting wasn't like it is now. You didn't send a text message or swipe left or right. I had to muster the courage to ask her to the town dance. When she said yes, well, my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. That night, under the string lights in the town square, I knew she was the one. She made me laugh, she challenged me, and she made me want to be a better man. We danced until our feet ached and the stars were high in the sky. From then on, we were inseparable. We didn't have much when we got married. Just a little house and a lot of love. Times were tough, but we made it work. Your grandma always said, Joe, love isn't about what you have, but what you give, and she gave me everything. Then the war came. I was just a young man, barely out of my teens when they sent me off. Saying goodbye to your grandma at the train station was the hardest thing I'd ever done. She gave me a letter to open every week, and those words kept me going when things got rough. There was one night, a night I'll never forget for as long as I live. The sky was black, not a star in sight, as if the heavens themselves had turned their back on us. The cold bit through every layer of clothing I had, settling deep in my bones. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and damp earth, and the only sound was the distant, rhythmic thud of artillery fire, a reminder that death lurked just beyond the horizon. I was huddled in a trench, knee-deep in mud that seemed to pull you down, like the earth itself wanted to swallow you whole. My hands were trembling, not just from the cold, but from the fear that gripped every part of me. Around me, the men sat in silence, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Some whispered prayers, others stared into the void, their breaths visible in the frigid air. And then, the silence broke. A deafening explosion shattered the night, shaking the ground beneath us. Dirt and debris rained down, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled the trench. I threw myself against the wall, clutching the only thing that kept me grounded. A small photo of your grandma. It was creased and smudged, worn from too many nights like this one. But in that moment, it was my anchor. I pressed it to my chest, closing my eyes against the chaos around me. I'll make it home to you, I whispered, though my voice was drowned out by the roar of war. I'll make it home. The minutes felt like hours. The world was chaos, shouts, explosions, the piercing whistle of incoming shells. At one point, I thought it was over. A blast so close it threw me off my feet, my ears ringing, my vision blurred. I lay there in the mud, gasping for breath, feeling the cold seep deeper into me. I thought of her smile, her laugh. I thought of her hands, so warm, so steady, holding mine. And somehow I got back up. My body moved on instinct, dragging me to cover, my legs trembling under me. I wasn't thinking of survival. I was thinking of her, of the life we dreamed of building together, of the family we hadn't yet started, of the promise I'd made to come back to her. When dawn finally broke, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The ground was littered with the aftermath of the night, craters, shattered helmets, and the haunting silence of those who hadn't made it. I sat there, covered in mud and tears I hadn't even realized I'd shed, clutching that photo like it was the most precious thing in the world. War changes you. It strips away the noise, the distractions, and leaves you bare. Just a man, his fear, and his love. That night taught me what mattered most. Not medals or glory, but the chance to hold the ones you love again. The chance to go home. There are moments in life when you realize just how much you can love something so small, so simple. Buddy, our scrappy little dog, wasn't just a pet, he was family. I remember the day we brought him home. He was just a pup, all floppy ears and boundless energy. He'd chase his tail for hours, and he had this funny way of tilting his head whenever I spoke to him, like he understood every word. He was there for everything, running circles around our children as they laughed, curling up at my feet after long days at work, even sitting beside me when I'd sit quietly, thinking about how to make ends meet. It's funny how a dog can sense when you need a little extra love. When Buddy passed, it felt like the house lost a little bit of its soul. I dug his grave under the old oak tree in the backyard, the one where the kids used to play. With every shovelful of dirt, I thought about all the joy he'd brought us and how fleeting those moments can be. Your grandma stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder, and said, "Joe, he gave us his whole heart. That's what matters. That's what life is about, isn't it? Giving your heart, no matter how much it might hurt later. Love isn't meant to last forever. It's meant to fill the time we have. Raising your father and your aunt wasn't easy, but it was worth every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every whispered, 'I'm sorry,' after a long day. Your father was the curious one, always climbing trees, bringing home frogs, and asking the kind of questions you couldn't answer in a single breath. And your aunt? She was the dreamer, always sketching or scribbling poems on scraps of paper, seeing the world in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. We didn't have much. I worked double shifts at the factory, then weekends doing odd jobs. There were nights when I came home so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. But the second those kids ran to me, yelling, "Daddy," and throwing their arms around my legs, it was like I'd been given a second wind. One winter, things were especially hard. The factory cut our hours and we struggled to pay the bills. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, my head in my hands, thinking I'd let my family down. Your grandma sat down beside me, slid a cup of coffee my way, and said, "Joe, we've been through worse and we've come out stronger. As long as we stick together, we'll get through this too." And she was right. We tightened our belts, leaned on each other, and made it through. That's the thing about challenges. They're not meant to break you. They're meant to show you just how strong you can be. One of the hardest parts of life is saying goodbye to the ones who raised you. My parents. They were good, hardworking people who gave everything they had to make sure I had a better shot at life. When I lost them, it was like losing the roots that held me steady. I remember the night my father passed. I sat by his bedside, holding his hand. He was weak, his voice barely above a whisper, but he looked at me with those same kind, steady eyes and said, "Joe, you've made me proud. You've done more than I could have ever hoped." When he took his last breath, I felt this deep, aching emptiness. But your grandma was there, just like she always was. She held me close and reminded me of something I'll never forget. "Joe, grief is the price we pay for love, and it's worth every tear." Her words carried me through the darkest days. They reminded me that even in loss, there's gratitude for the time we had, the memories we shared, and the love that remains. Then, years later, you kids came along. Let me tell you, being a grandpa is the greatest job in the world. Watching you grow, hearing your laughter, seeing your curiosity, it's like getting to relive the best parts of life all over again. Your father says I spoil you too much, but I tell him, that's a grandpa's job. When I see you run around, carefree and full of wonder, it reminds me of what life is really about. It's not about the hardships, though there will be plenty of those. It's about the moments of joy, the connections we make, and the love we share. Life isn't easy, my dear ones. There will be storms, and there will be days when you feel like the world is against you. But I want you to remember this. You are stronger than you know. You have the courage of those who came before you, the love of those who stand beside you, and the hope of those who believe in you. When the road gets tough, lean on your family. When the darkness feels overwhelming, look for the light. It's always there, even if it's just a glimmer. And when life knocks you down, get back up. Not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Then you kids came along, and let me tell you, there's nothing in the world like being a grandpa. It's like someone handed me a second chance to experience life's most beautiful moments. But this time, with even more appreciation. Watching you run around the backyard, your faces lit up with joy, or hearing your laughter echo through the house. It fills a part of my heart I didn't even know was missing. Every giggle, every hug, Every time you call out, "Grandpa," it's a little reminder of just how precious life is. I can sit for hours just watching you play, seeing your imaginations run wild. You make me laugh with your endless questions and the way you see the world, so full of wonder and possibilities. It's like reliving the best parts of life, but with none of the worry, none of the rush. Just pure, unfiltered joy. I see a little bit of your father in you, the way you're so curious about everything, always asking, why this, why that? And then there's a bit of your aunt, too. That spark of creativity, the way you paint or write stories just like she used to. It's like watching the past, the present, and the future all come together in one perfect moment. But more than that, I see you. I see the incredible little people you are. I see your kindness, your determination, the way you look out for each other. It reminds me that, even in this big, unpredictable world, love is the thread that connects us all. There's something special about being a grandparent, you know? With your own kids, you're so busy working, providing, and making sure everything's okay that sometimes you miss the little things. But with grandkids, oh, it's different. I get to slow down. I get to see every tiny miracle. The way your face lights up when you figure something out for the first time. The way you dance like nobody's watching. The way you hold my hand so tightly like I'm the most important person in your world. And let me tell you something. You've taught me just as much as I've taught you. You've taught me how to laugh a little louder, to find joy in the smallest things, to appreciate life in ways I never thought possible. You've reminded me that no matter how hard things might get, there's always something worth smiling about. You kids are my pride and joy, every single one of you. When I see you, I see hope. I see the future. And it makes me so proud to think that maybe, just maybe, the love and lessons your grandma and I passed down will live on in you. Because that's what life is really about. Passing on the good, the love, the laughter, so it carries on long after we're gone. You might not understand this yet, but one day you will. When you look into the eyes of someone you love more than anything in the world, and you realize they carry a piece of you with them, it's the most humbling, wonderful feeling. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now listen closely, because if there's one thing I hope you remember, it's this. Life isn't about the things you own or the titles you earn. It's about the relationships you build, the love you share, and the person you become along the way. I didn't always know that. When I was a young man, I thought proving myself meant working harder, earning more, and showing the world I could succeed. I spent long hours in a factory, sweating through double shifts, determined to make a life better than what my parents had. But what I didn't see then was how much of myself I was leaving behind. There were days I came home so tired that I could barely muster a smile, let alone listen to your grandma's stories about her day or your father's excitement about the frog he caught. It took me time, too much time, if I'm honest, to learn that love isn't proven by the size of a paycheck or the roof you put over someone's head. It's proven in the little moments, the things you do every day to show the people in your life that they matter. It's in the way you listen when they speak, the way you hold them when they're hurting, the way you put aside your pride and say, "I'm sorry," when you've made a mistake. Love is not about grand gestures. It's about consistency, kindness, and being there, even when it's hard. When I was courting your grandma, oh, she was the light of my life. I thought the best way to win her heart was to impress her. I'd buy her little gifts with what little money I had, thinking that would show her how much I cared. But do you know what she cherished most? The afternoons we spent walking hand in hand by the river, talking about dreams and sharing secrets. It was in those quiet moments, not the gifts, that I learned the real way to show love is by being fully present with someone. As I grew older, I realized something even deeper. Love isn't just about how you feel. It's about what you do. When your grandma lost her mother, I remember holding her for hours as she cried, not saying a word because no words could fix it. When your father scraped his knee trying to climb that old oak tree, I didn't just bandage him up. I sat with him, told him about all the times I'd fallen as a boy, and let him know it was okay to try again. That's what love looks like. It's action, patience, and showing up day after day. But let me tell you, love isn't just for others. You've got to show it to yourself too. There were times in my life when I was so hard on myself, when I thought I wasn't good enough, wasn't doing enough. It's easy to let fear stop you, to let that voice in your head tell you you'll fail or that you're not worthy. But you've got to drown out that voice. You've got to look in the mirror and remind yourself that you're doing your best. And that's all anyone can ask of you. Fear is a tricky thing. It'll try to stop you from chasing your dreams, from taking risks, from telling someone you love them. I almost let it stop me once. When I was just a boy, I wanted to ask your grandma to dance at a town hall social. I was scared to death. What if she said no? What if I made a fool of myself? But then I thought, what's worse? Failing or never knowing? So I walked across that room, my palms sweating and my knees shaking, and I asked her, do you know what she said? She smiled the kind of smile that could melt the coldest winter and said, I thought you'd never ask. From that moment on, I promised myself I'd never let fear hold me back again. And I hope you won't either. Fear is just a shadow. It looks big and scary, but it can't touch you unless you let it. So, take the leap, say the words, try the thing that seems impossible. You might stumble, you might fall, but you'll always rise again. And in the end, you'll be proud of the courage it took to try. Now, as an old man, I look back on my life, the struggles, the heartbreaks, the triumphs, and I see one thing very clearly. The greatest joys come from the people we love and the moments we share. I've been blessed with a family that fills my heart, grandchildren who make me laugh, and a lifetime of memories that I wouldn't trade for the world. So here's my advice to you. Never let a day go by without telling the people you care about that you love them. Not once, not twice, every chance you get. Hug your parents. Call your siblings. Write that letter you've been meaning to send. Show your love not just in words, but in actions. And never take a single moment for granted. When you wake up in the morning, be thankful for the sun on your face. When you sit down to eat, savor every bite. When you laugh, laugh loud enough that the whole world can hear. Because life is a gift, my dear ones. It's messy and imperfect, but it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever have. Take a moment each day to appreciate the little things. You might not realize it now, but those little things are what make life truly remarkable. A sunrise painting the sky with colors you thought existed only in dreams. The sound of birds singing, even if just faintly through your window. The way a kind word from a stranger can lift your spirits, or how a hug from someone you love feels like a shield against the world. It's so easy to get caught up in the rush of life. Deadlines, obligations, worries, they pile up and make you think that the big moments are what you're working toward, that happiness is something waiting for you on the other side of achievement. But the truth is, happiness is here, right now. It's in the steaming cup of coffee you sip in the morning. It's in the way your dog wags its tail when you walk through the door. It's in the laughter that erupts at the dinner table over a silly story. When I was younger, I used to think the big things were what mattered most. Graduations, promotions, buying a home. Those were the markers of a good life, right? But as I've grown older, I've come to see that the big things are just milestones. The real beauty of life is what happens in between. It's the quiet moments, the fleeting seconds that pass by unnoticed if you're not paying attention. I remember one particular morning years ago. Your grandma and I were sitting on the porch. She was humming a tune, the same one she used to hum when we danced in the living room as newlyweds. The sun was rising, and its light was hitting her face just so, making her look like an angel. She caught me staring and laughed, asking what I was looking at. I told her, just appreciating how lucky I am. That moment, it wasn't planned, and it didn't come with any fanfare. But I'd trade 1,000 big moments to relive it just once. Life is precious, and it's fragile. There will be hard times, days when the world feels like it's too much to bear. But even in those moments, there's something to hold on to. A smile from a friend, the way the rain sounds as it hits the roof, the scent of fresh bread baking in the oven. These are life's little gifts, reminders that beauty can be found even in the darkest times. I want you to promise me something. Don't wait for the perfect time to appreciate what you have, because the perfect time is now. Stop and take it all in, the people around you, the love you feel, the warmth of the sun on your skin. Cherish it, because these are the things that make life worthwhile. Every day, find something to be grateful for, and when you do, let it fill your heart. Say it out loud if you can. Tell the people you love that you're grateful for them. Send that text, make that call, write that letter. Let them know how much they mean to you, because none of us knows how many tomorrows we have left. And when you're alone, don't be afraid to take a moment to just breathe. Feel the air in your lungs. Hear the beat of your heart. Those are miracles too. You're alive, my dear ones, and that alone is something extraordinary. In the end, life isn't about the grand gestures or the monumental achievements. It's about how many sunrises you've watched, how many laughs you've shared, how many times you've held someone close and felt their love in return. It's the simple joys, the ones that don't need an invitation or a special occasion, that make life truly beautiful. So take a moment, every day, appreciate the little things. They're not so little after all.